Anatomy and Physiology.
Okay, hey guys, this is Dr. Sean, and we're going to be starting with our basics of the introduction to anatomy and physiology. Now, this is a PowerPoint presentation, and it's based on a bunch of different books. I've been teaching this for a long time, and I'm going to be using we got the 6th edition here by Gerard Tortora. This is Anatomy, Principles of Human Anatomy, The Fundamentals of Human Anatomy and Physiology by Rizzo. It's an okay book, I guess. This is a great one here is Memler's Human Body in Health and Disease. And then the latest one I have here is Hurley, and this is probably your class one, The Human Body in Health and Illness. So we're going to be going over all of this stuff up here in the up in this way right here. Okay, so we're going to go over some things like homeostasis, the definition of anatomy and physiology, the levels of organization, which are going to be like how we determine things are split up. Then we're going to do the characteristics of life. Now this is a good hot topic, especially these days, because we're trying to figure out exactly what's going on and what is something that's alive. It's kind of cool. Life maintenance, or once you find out something's alive, how do you keep it alive, right? So I'm working on a tablet here, and it's going to show up on the screen for you guys up through here, and make sure that you're just kind of following along. This should be about 25 minutes, I think, or something like that. Cavities, not the ones in your teeth. These are the cavities, the open spaces in your body, okay? We have different ones: abdominal, dorsal, ventral, cranial. The 9 body regions, this is going to be the abdominal pelvic area, and we'll go over that. I'll do a little diagram, and the body quadrants, which that's what you'll probably use more than the 9 regions. But the 9 regions are really good for testing purposes, so just remember that, okay? Anatomical position, probably one of the most important things that we can do. Now, this is going to be the envision someone standing in front of you with their palms facing out, so that their thumbs are going to be pointing out, hands at the sides. That's anatomical position. So whenever you're thinking about all this next stuff, the directions and all of these kind of things, this is where we want to go with those kind of ideas, okay? Each of the organ systems, we're going to go over all, whatever, there's 11 of them here. So we've got, if you want to count 12, if you want to go down here, where is it? Reproductive right here, there's 2. There's a male, and there's a female version. That's a terrible drawing, but whatever. I have to look down. I was looking down. Positions, superior, of course, the upper part of the body, the anterior, the front, the transverse is across this way, and I'll go over a little bit of those. We'll do some drawings on that stuff kind of too. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get each one of these things going as we go. Early stage of anatomy, remember, like early on when anatomy and physiology was first started out, it was basically interested in dealing with things like injuries. What happened to people? Grog, the cave person, fell out of a tree and bonked himself on the head, and they saw that there was blood and all this kind of stuff, and people started going, hey, that's interesting. And then as time went on, other people fell out of trees, and they started seeing different things, and they were starting to understand the healing process a little bit and the pathology process. But pathology means the problems that can have in the body. Okay, early healers, of course, they dealt with superstition. They weren't sure why things happened, especially if it wasn't a what we could call, like, say, a laceration, which is a cut, or a contusion, which is like a bruise, or an abrasion, which is a scrape. So if those weren't showing, and if, say, not a broken bone or something where there's an actual deformity, like, right, you see someone's broken bone through here, we would also have other issues that would happen. People would get bloating, or they would turn colors, or maybe turn bluish or something like that, or have problems breathing or coughing excessively. And they didn't understand that there was things like viruses and bacteria and fungi and all this kind of stuff. So what happened was they would blame it on spirits. Okay, for example, farts used to be blamed on little demons, because then before, I guess, they had dogs, I don't know, but it used to be blamed on kind of that thing. And it was the smell of death kind of idea. This is old, weird stuff, so just bear with me on those. I like that stuff. It's interesting. Okay. What's the scientific method? The scientific method is the idea of a hypothesis, and then proving the hypothesis or disproving the hypothesis, and then doing studies to confirm those ideas. Now, in these days, we're pretty good at doing those, but we always have questions. There's always stuff like that. Many of the words we have are going to be in either Greek or in Latin. Those are the 2 main languages, and then the rest of it is usually thrown in names or acronyms like COPD or whatever, something like GERD, those kind of issues. but most of it is going to be the Latin pieces of words and Greek pieces of words. Generally, they don't combine those two, but together they can change them. So, and build words and build your terminology. Now, anatomy and physiology is just a language, guys. So get used to the words, because there's a lot of words that you already use that you're not going to use. You're not going to use commonly until you start working in the healthcare system. And when you start working in there, you're going to think like the elbow is not going to be elbow anymore. It's going to be a Lecranon process or something like that. Okay, so we're going to get into anatomy, which is just naming everything and knowing where it is and what connects to what. It's more like just maps, okay? And then physiology is how it works, right? We've got this right here. And we go down to the next, our next little slide, and we're going to have levels of organization. Now, if we look up here, I'm going to do a little bit of a drawing here, and we're going to have, the first part we have is we're going to have our little atoms, and little atoms would have, little orbitals of things, and you have like little electrons, which are negative, and here you're going to have a proton, and you're going to have neutrons, which have zero, what's it called? They have zero charge, okay? So as a bunch of atoms will come together to make something like molecule. Okay, that's the second one in here. So a group of those. So if you have something like H2O, okay, H2O, which is water, okay, or CO2, which is what we breathe out. Okay, those are both molecules. Now, bioactive molecules are when you start taking some of this and some of this and adding all of these different ones together. Now, if you look at the what's called the table of elements, it's basically kind of a table that looks kind of like this, or like this, like this. It has a bunch of different, where we go, right? A bunch of different elements in there, and you'll find things like Fe, which is iron, and you'll find N for nitrogen, and all these different ones. Now, when you start adding them up together and they start making something that's actually useful, that's called a bioactive molecule. So we go from an atom to something like, oh, that's your water one, right? Now you add a bunch of those together with some CO2, some carbon, and some other hydrogens and stuff like that, and we're going to come up with, say, some kind of like protein. Thing that your body makes is proteins. It makes a lot of other stuff too. There's carbohydrates, there's lipids, and there's some other things in there too, but this is the main idea. Now, once you get a bunch of these that are working together, we're going to end up with things called organelles, and organelles would be like, here we have say like your mitochondria. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It's a little piece of the cell. Now, a bunch of cells, or a bunch of, what are these called? Organelles get together, and you're going to start making the basic unit of life. It has got a nucleus in it. It's going to have the reticuli, and it's going to have some other little things in there. Okay, you're going to have there we go. There's a cell. Okay, basic idea of a cell. Has a bunch of organisms. It's the basic unit of life. Okay, that's going to bring us into a whole other thing. And as you get a bunch of these that work together, okay, we're going to have a bunch of these. They line up like this, for example. Okay, we're going to go like this. These are just a bunch of cells that are working. There's a nuclei, nucleuses, basically. And they stack together, and these are going to become a tissue. Okay? And that's right there. So we have tissues are being made. And then with tissues, we're going to have some kind of organ. And we're going to say like this doesn't, not what the heart looks like, but the heart is an organ. Okay? And you take all of the organs of that system, which is, say this, for example, is the cardio for heart, and vascular system, all of the tubes and stuff that branch off it, and you can have the cardiovascular system, right? That's not the pharmacy. But then organ systems, then we have organ systems, then we have organisms. So here's where we're going to have a little person, and remember, we talked about anatomical positions, so we're going to go like this. Anyway, there we go. There's our entire organism. Now, you get a bunch of these, and you have a bunch of people, right? And that's your organization right there. Okay, so we went through, here we have atoms, molecules, bioactive molecules, okay, in here. And then we have organelles, which are like organs of the cell, and then the cell itself. Okay, and then we go on through this. So this is the levels of organization. We see this in most of the books, and this is most of our ideas of the way we're building up the process of tearing things down. Now, of course, you can go from here, okay, we can go, let's see, we can go from here, and we look at this guy, in here, and we go way down further back, and we have electrons, we have protons, we have neutrons, we have quarks and all this other kind of weird stuff way back there, and even in the quantum field. We don't worry about that in that class. We're going to start at least at this point, okay? Next one we go to here is, once you've discovered something like the basic unit of life, which is what a cell, right? So we're going to put a little cell right here. Here's our little cell. Here's the nucleus. Okay, and here's what's called the endoplasmic reticulums or reticuli, and then you have another thing called the Golgi apparatus, and here's some little vesicles, and here's some other little fellas in here. We've got kind of all of this. So we have our little cell in through here, and that cell is going to become, of course, tissues, and then tissues become organs, then organ systems and organisms. So once we have an organism, we have some kind of thing, right? We have some kind of, right? And here he is, little dude, just sitting there. And we find him, and we're going to go, hey, how do we know that this thing is alive? So what do we have to do is we have to see if it has any of these things over here. And what that's going to be is does it have any movement? Does it move around? Does it have responsiveness? Responsiveness is our ability to affect it with something. Maybe we poke it and it retreats, or maybe we put light towards it and it comes towards the light or moves away from light. That's responsiveness. Now, does it grow and reproduce? Growth and reproduction. Growth is like it becomes something bigger, of course. So and then reproduction is making little baby ones. So you're going to have a bunch of little guys here. Because there's just little babies. That's reproduction. Okay, growth is going from here to here. This is a big guy, and this is an adult, say, and this is a juvenile, whatever. Respiration, is it using gas exchange? Digestion, is it bringing something in and breaking it down? This is breaking down. Okay, this isn't just chewing. Okay, this is actually making stuff into big things into small things so it can be later absorbed, which is here, and then circulation usually is with some kind of liquid, but it could also be plasma perhaps or something like that. Assimilation is using everything that it's absorbed and creating more cells. So the food that we eat is broken down into amino acids and lipids and carbohydrates, and then we build it back up into other proteins and other fats and other things that we need, hormones and neurotransmitters and stuff like that. And at the end is excretion, what comes out the other end. Now, in this process here, we also have to look at another total. This is kind of a weird one, but what do we do with, say, for example, here's fire. That's a terrible drawing of fire, but there's fire. So does fire follow all of these things? That's a good question. Does it move? Well, absolutely it moves, okay? Is it responsiveness? Yes, if you put more fuel there, it gets bigger. If you put water on it, it gets smaller. Does it grow? Yes, with the proper fuel and conditions, yes. Does it reproduce? Well, yes, you can make all kinds of little fires down here. You can even, put whatever fire over this side, whatever. The fire happens all over the place. Okay. Does it reproduce? Yes. Does it use air? Absolutely. Oxygen. There's what's called the triangle of fire, which is heat, fuel, and oxygen. And if those three things are available, the fire exists. You take one of them away, and you get rid of the fire. But that's a totally different class. Digestion, yes, it breaks things down. Does it absorb things? Well, it does turn whatever it burns into hot gas. Okay, and that's a kind of absorption, I guess. Circulation, is it moving fluids? No, it doesn't move fluids, but it does move the plasma like we talked about. And does it assimilate? Well, absolutely. These are both very related, and it's going to assimilate something into something else. And at the end, of course, we would have the end result is just a bunch of ash, right? A bunch of carbon that's left behind. So there you go. So is fire alive? That's always a good question. No, it's really not considered alive. But then we have to get into things like what about our little friend? Was this one? This right? Here we go. We all know this one, right? This is our coronavirus. Is it alive? Okay. Is it a little happy guy who's just trying to survive and get to the next person and have kids and does it move? It gets around somehow. It has a vehicle, which is usually like droplets or something like that. It does have responsiveness, of course, because our immune system will attack it and it has to respond by either mutating and changing out somehow or becoming somehow different. He does have responsiveness, right? And he does have, we don't know about digestion. We don't know what it takes in for food. We think it's a pretty simple, what's called mRNA, which we'll talk about at a later time. It's a kind of, it just basically has information and it's going to transfer that information from one thing to another. It's kind of like having a USB drive with some information on it, and you plug it into the computer, it automatically downloads it. That's one of the things that happen with really kind of like the way viruses work. Now, once you find out that this guy's alive, so how do we make sure that our little friend here, remember this guy, we figured, hey, he is alive, okay, and he's alive, but, how do we keep him alive? So he doesn't become dead. We need to do a couple things. We need to make sure he has water, food, oxygen, heat, and pressure. What do we mean by pressure? This is atmospheric pressure. If we don't have the right atmospheric pressure, and we send this guy way out into space, he could pop, okay? We don't want him to pop and break apart into little tiny pieces, if we go too high, because there's so little pressure that it presses on the inside or pulls him apart from way up in space. Basically, you boil away is what happens. Now, if we put you too far under the ocean, you would smash him down, okay, which is what happens with people when they go in deep diving, okay. So this is kind of a pressure thing, and there has to be a pressure gradient or a pressure variant or a pressure amount that is useful for whatever's living. Okay, now that's kind of still basic stuff with anatomy and physiology. Really, that's kind of biology, and we're kind of getting into sciencey kind of stuff. That's it. But we need to have that as a good foundation for how we're getting things done. Now, we maintain a stable environment. This is called homeostasis, okay? Homeostasis, okay? In some of your guys' work, you're going to have some kind of discussion board or some kind of like case study where you're going to have to determine how to decide what is up here some kind of homeostatic mechanism. So let's say here they regulate body temperature. Think of a thermostat, right? In your house, you have a thermostat. You can set it to 68 degrees. When it starts getting too cold, it turns the heater on. When it gets too hot, it turns it off. This is also called negative feedback, which just means is when it gets to a certain point, everything shuts down. Okay, it stops it. Now, in hours, we're talking about something like this morning where I'm at, I had to shovel snow. And I had a coat on and a hat on and gloves, and I was out shoveling snow. But as I started working, I started building up enough heat. And one of the things when you build up enough heat, you don't want to overheat, because then you start breaking stuff down and messing some physiological things up. Your body doesn't work as well. So I would do things like sweat, which is evaporation to get rid of the heat, or I would increase the blood flow to the surface and radiate that heat off. That's kind of a mechanism of homeostasis. There's many of those. And, as you start thinking about it, you'll start seeing more and more. There we go. Now here we go. Organization of the human body. Now we've gone through cells, we've gone through organelles, we've gone through organelles, the cells and tissues and organs and stuff. And now we're at the human body. We have to talk about anatomical position. So here we have our little person here, right? Little guy. Oh, there you are. And you're standing there, and this is anatomical position with thumbs facing out. There's their fingers. Okay. Anyway, this is anatomical position here. Main thing is thumbs are facing out or laterally. You're facing them. So when you're looking at this person, okay, my right side is here, but this is his left hand, and this is his right hand, I believe. Yes, yeah. Okay, this is right hand, and this is left hand. Now, when I'm looking at the person, this is my right side, and this is their left side. But you got to be careful of this, because you see the patient's right. You're always talking about their right. Okay, axial is going to be really, let's go to here and change this around a little bit. Yeah, we can go axial is this. This is all the axial part of the body, okay, all through here. Okay, that's the axial, right through there. Appendicular, we get through there, we're going to go out through here. That's going to be his arms, whatever, and his legs, okay. These are the appendices, I guess, you're the appendicular. Okay, that's the appendicular part of the body. Okay, let's go to the next one here. Actually, as we leave this one, now we're going to get into something like cavities, viscera. If we look at the body, there's our head. Okay, here's our neck, and then here's our belly. It goes down like this, and the back of the head comes down here, back of the neck. And here we go. There's our butt, and there's our legs. Okay, so this is kind of the trunk and head and neck, of course. So we have a couple cavities. Okay, so cavities. Cranial cavity is going to be up through here. Okay, there's our cranial cavity. In there, the cranial cavity has the brain. Okay, and then we have the ventral and dorsal. Ventral, okay, is going to be the front side of the body. Do it like this. Okay, so ventral is basically anything this way. Okay, anything this way is ventral. And everything this way is dorsal. Okay, so if you think of this one here, dorsal, think of like a shark. Okay, we got a little rainbow stuff going. Here's a shark. This is the dorsal fin. Okay, that's dorsal, so it's always on the back. The ventral, if you're looking at the same shark, we have over here these vents. Okay, those are the gills, or vents, we'll call them. They look like kind of like vents. Okay. As we get past that, so we understand front and back. Oops, there we go. So this is going to be anterior. Okay, and this is going to be posterior. You can draw the same kind of little drawing here, okay? Now we have thoracic. I'm going to do this in a totally different color because I want this to be, well, I guess not a different color. Here's thoracic. Okay, thoracic is going to have, right through here, swoop, okay? That's going to have your lungs. That's going to have your heart. Okay, that's going to be your cardiovascular, stuff like that. Now, as we come down through here, we're going to get this section here. This is called the diaphragm. Okay, this is the diaphragm, right around me. Okay, so there's the diaphragm, and then in through here we have the abdominal pelvic. Okay, that's this one here, abdominal pelvic. Okay, now there's no in through here. This is the splitting point in through here for the thoracic versus abdominal pelvic cavities. Now the abdominal pelvic is two words too, right? Abdominal, that's the belly, and then pelvic is down through here. And so we have to do a little imaginary line. There's nothing really that tells you other than maybe your belt, but that's, some people wear the belt high, some people wear it low. That's kind of like what happens in this section here. So there's a little belt buckle there. Okay. Now, if we're looking at these different things here, there's one more too we have to go through here, and this is the spinal back through here. I'm going to get this one colored in. Not really spinal, yeah, spinal, okay, or vertebral, but it's a spinal cavity. And that's where your spinal cord goes, okay? So we have all these different ones in through here. The other section here, we're going to talk about this kind of on the next section. I'm going to try to erase this with thoracic cavity, and this is the abdominal pelvic cavity. So these ones here, we have two things to know. Visceral and parietal. Whenever we're saying visceral, we're talking about the guts and stuff. So if we look at like parietal is the inside of the wall. So let's take the heart, okay? And we're going to do, the heart is kind of, it's more of that shape than it is really a heart shape, but we're talking about the heart, right? So along the outside of the heart, we have this kind of tissue called the pericardium. Peri meaning around, and then cardium meaning the heart. Okay, so cardio, okay, is heart, and then we have pericardium, okay, is this stuff right around the heart. It's a tissue around the heart. It's called a serous tissue, right? It makes a serous fluid. And then it flips around and it goes around like this, and it makes a little sac. This is called the pericardial space. That's open space. Okay, and this over through here is called the parietal. Okay, pericardium. So we have the heart in there, and it's surrounded by this little container. Okay, and around that there's serous fluid in there that help cushion and actually moisten the heart and keep it moving smoothly in that area as it reduces friction. Now as we go into this one, okay, we have also in here in the lungs Visceral pleura, for example, is right around is on the lung. So here's the lungs, and here's the trachea that comes up. Kind of look like this. Okay, and around that poor guy, happy little lungs, is this visceral pleura. Visceral because it's on the organ itself. Viscera means organs, or means basically parts, right? Then it flips around in here and makes a pleural space, and it becomes the parietal pleura. Okay, remember we had, there we go. Okay, remember we had the diaphragm down here. Okay, and we have, this is the inside of the rib cage, right through here. So we're looking straight at a person. Okay, and there's one lung here and one on the other side. So if we're looking at the little guy, we see their body. There's the arms come off like this. Here's the chest, and there's your little belly. Okay, here's the diaphragm. You have one lung here and one lung here. And then in the middle of all that jazz, we have, of course, the heart. And they're covered by these different coverings. Now, down here in the belly, we have these ones too. We'll do sparklies. Okay, so we have the guts. Now, remember, on the outside of it, we're going to have the visceral peritoneum. Okay, you heard of peritonitis. You heard of peritoneal probably at some point. Peritonitis is inflammation of this stuff in here. Now, the visceral peritoneum, of course, flips around and comes to the parietal peritoneum on the inside of the abdominal wall. So we have these different layers in here, and they're important to know. And for some reason, some books really want to hammer them in on you, which is fine. I mean, you got to learn the stuff. So remember that parietal is on the outside wall, or the inside wall, actually. So you can see through here. This is the wall. Or say like in the lungs, here's the rib cage, right? That's on the inside wall. And parietal means wall, right? And then visceral means on the organ itself. So we have to learn our other words, which is cardio for heart, plural for lung, and peritoneal for intestinal, basically. Now that goes down through here. This stuff here, we're talking about the different membranes. And we're going to talk about something like serous membranes. That's what these are right through here. And those surround all of the organs, so they make serous fluid. And serous fluid is a really thin, slimy kind of fluid that helps reduce friction, because the heart's moving around in the chest, the lungs are moving inside the rib cage, the guts are moving around with each other, and they don't want to stick together. And it helps them become more nutrient rich and get their nutrients and some other stuff and protect them, basically, is what it does. The synovial would be like in the joints. So as we have a knee, in between here is a capsule. Okay, and in that capsule is what we would call synovial fluid. And it has the same kind of thing. It has a little covering on the inside, and it goes all through here. But as it moves, these slide together, this end here, the synovial joint, right, is what they're called. They slide together and it makes more synovial fluid. Those have no openings to the outside, okay? These have no openings to the outside, the serous membranes. And the last ones we have, which is down here, the second to last one actually, is the mucous membranes, and those all have openings. So your mouth has an opening. Your eyes, basically, but that is really disturbing. There's a nostril, and here's like, say, ears have an opening. And then you have some digestive openings, and you have some urinary openings, and reproductive openings. So there's at least 3 different sets down here. Those are mucous membranes, and those make mucus as opposed to serous fluid. What's the difference, you say? pH, which is the amount of acid that they have, and the amount of like prostaglandins and some other like immune factors in there to help you keep the bad guys out, because you got to keep stuff out of here, because you don't want all the bugs getting in your mouth and in your ears and your nose and your butt and all that kind of stuff. Last but not least is cutaneous membrane, which is your skin. And that's the one that covers the whole thing. And that's a whole other chapter, which we'll get into at some point. Okay. Next one here, organ systems. We have really, these are kind of out of order, but we have 12, or 11 actually. I mean, 11 if you're talking like through here, this one here, reproductive, you have also, there's going to be a male one and a female one. And really, guys, with science, that's all there is, because we're talking about procreation, and in order to make a new little being, you need to have the male sperm and the female egg. It doesn't really work any other way than that. That's what we actually call science. Now, that's different maybe with the gender, I don't know, but we're not going to worry about that. So other ones we have here. So there's our integumentary. This is the skin we were talking about. The largest organ that we have, really heavy, covers the entire outside. Skeletal, this is the of course, all the bones, right? Bones and ligaments really is what it ends up containing. And with bones and ligaments, we're looking at structure, where the functions of these things are going to be structure, okay? Structure, protection, okay? Storage of minerals, okay? And it's also going to have bone marrow, which has two functions. There's one that has just fat, it's yellow marrow, and the red marrow actually helps with blood cells, okay, blood production, okay, all the different ones. Muscular system obviously is the muscles, and that one helps us by protection, okay, it gets us away. Heat production, movement, and stability. Stability being like you can stand still, right? You can still stand up. Nervous system is a controller. It's the fast version. Fast controls, well, whatever, and coordinates. Okay, it also receives information from your fingers touch something, right? The nervous system receives information, sends it to the brain, where it then will interpret that information. So that's the second part, interpret. It says, wow, that's hot, okay, and then it reacts. Okay, so it sends information down to the other muscles to say, pull that away, that's too hot, okay. The other one here, endocrine, is slower. That's L-O-W-E-R. And that one creates the hormones, which help in growth and maintenance of homeostasis over longer periods of time. Okay, sometimes years, as opposed to the nervous system, which is usually pretty much quicker. Okay, digestive system, we got this one, right? Now, how do these all, you could say they all protect us in different ways by promoting and making things and working with each other. They all work together. They're all interconnected. Okay, digestive system brings in, mechanically breaks down food with the teeth, moves the food with what's called peristalsis, and then digests it with chemicals, that's chemical breakdown, and then eventually absorbs it into the system like we talked about with the mechanisms of life and all that stuff. Absorbs that stuff and helps you to break down things and rebuild what you need. Okay, that's what digestive system does. And then also it gets rid of all the toxins and all the stuff that you don't need through feces and whatnot. Urinary system, this is the liquid version of it. And what it is really is a filtering system for the blood. And when the blood gets filtered, okay, through the kidneys, you have a couple kidneys here, and then you have the ureters, and it goes down the bladder and then out. So that whole system there filters the liquid portion of blood, gets rid of some of the salts, gets rid of some of the acids, and also helps you maintain your fluid balance and your blood pressure, actually, which we'll talk about in a whole other thing. The other one, too, we have, last one here, is lymphatic. Let's stop that for a second here. Let's go here. Let's see. Sometimes we even take breaks, right? So we had to take a break. Lymphatic system is the next one. Now, the lymphatic system is part of the immune system. Now, what it is a one-way system. We talk about it. It's one of the least understood and the least studied. I mean, there's a lot of study going on it, but people really kind of take it for granted. It has to do with lymph nodes. It's a way to keep bacteria and funguses and viruses and all this other bad stuff out of your system and kind of coordinate it. So you kind of think of it as a kind of a sewer system almost for your body, but it's also has a lot to do with the movements of a lot of minerals and a lot of other factors in there. We'll talk about that when there's lymph nodes and there's the spleen and there's all kinds of other cool stuff in there. Mostly for protection, that's a good one. Okay, cardiovascular, we're talking about, again, the heart and all the vessels that lead off the heart. And that's the whole function of that is to move fluids within the body to transfer and pick up and drop off things like oxygen and carbon dioxide and nutrients and waste products and hydrogen ions, which is in the form of acids and bases and all this other kind of stuff. And the respiratory system is to get rid of carbon dioxide, which is a waste product of our cellular metabolism, and to bring in oxygen, which we need to help burn or oxidize glucose, which is the main sugar of the body. So it's a whole big system that we get to go into in the whole book. It's kind of the whole the way the way the whole body works is to understand all of these put together. Okay. Now over here we got, as we get in further into anatomy, we have to understand what the heck we're talking about. When we're talking about these kind of things up through here, we're going to talk about the different positions. Remember anatomical positions. So we're going to do this again. Let's see, what color are we at here? There we go. And we're going to draw this little person. Okay, here's our head. There's our ears and our neck. Remember anatomical position. Thumbs out. There's fingers. Okay, we'll do a little bit, hopefully a better drawing. There's his little belly. There's his legs. Come down. Put his feet out like this. Okay, put the other foot out like this. Yeah. So I'm trying to look at the screen. I have a little tablet with me here. Oops, and there's his thumb. I don't know why that one keeps coming out weird. And there we go. Oop. Yeah, let's undo that line like this. There we go. So here's our anatomical position. And in that process, we do his little eyes. Okay, there he goes, our little fella. And we have to understand some of our different positions and determinations of where things are. Superior. Now, it doesn't matter if this guy's laying down like this. I'm going to draw him with this color. Okay, he's laying down. Right? There's his belly, and here's his arms, right? So say he's laying down in an anatomical position still. There's his fingers, okay? So he's laying down. Superior, we're going to do a different color for all of these. Well, let's do purple, okay? So superior is this way, okay? Superior is this way. It doesn't matter what way he's sitting, okay? If we're talking horizontal, horizontal is this way across the horizon, and it'd be this way across him, right? Same thing. He's laying there. You can see the horizon in the background. He's laying on a slab, for example. And here we can see that behind him is way back in the distance is the, oops, there we go, is the back corner of the wall or something, right? That's horizontal. This coming up towards the head here, this is superior. This is superior. Inferior is always going to be down. Okay, is always going to be down this way. Much easier way to understand it that way. Okay, anterior up here in the front. We're looking at his anterior, so we're going to put an A on his chest here, and this is posterior. And posterior is his butt. Okay, that's going to be the back side. Now, medial towards the middle. We put a line right down the center here. This is going to be a sagittal line. Sagittarius, and we're going to go towards the middle is medial, towards the middle. Doesn't matter where we are, towards the middle. This, we're looking at the lateral sides. We don't really see that whole thing. Lateral, we're looking laterally. This is lateral. As we go out further, that's lateral or distal. Okay. Usually distal is talking about the legs. Distally down, the feet are distal to the hips. The hand is distal to the shoulder. The hand is also inferior to the shoulder, okay? The hips are superior to the ankles. That makes sense, okay? Deep is when we get into the body, okay? We go in and we push something inside him, right? We dig deeper, for example, okay? Superficially means on the outside. Supine, this is how he's sitting, or how he's laying, actually. He's laying in a supine position. Prone would be face down. Sagittal, we talked about that. That's this line through here. And if we cut him through, we're looking sagittally. This is a sagittal view. If we're looking at the front of him, this is a frontal view or coronal view. So corona is really, okay, you've seen, let's see, let's go like this. You see here's the sun. Okay, there's the sun with its, this is a corona around the top, C-O-R-O-N-A, okay. Okay, there's the corona of the sun, and the coronal line would be this way, okay? Or if he's looking, he's turning this way. That's a coronal cut, that's a coronal cut, whatever. If I cut your nose off, that's a coronal cut, okay? Transverse is this way, or this way. That's transverse. Notice it's different than horizontal. And then oblique is anything at an angle other than those. Okay, transverse, oblique, and whatever stuff like that. So hopefully you guys can understand those a little easier. I'm losing my list. So body quadrants and body positions and stuff like that. So we went over anatomical position. Remember, everything is always in anatomical position. And we're going to start with the, let's do your little body here. There's your little arms, right, like this here. And then we have a little belly, right, and there's your belly button. Okay, there's your legs. It comes down like this. And in the, we're going to draw a little like this. We're going to put our quadrants. So quadrants means 4 parts. And we're going to do right in the belly button, or the umbilicus. And we're going to draw all the way up, and all the way down, and all the way out onto the sides. This is a transverse line, and this is a sagittal line. And so remember, we're looking at the patient at their front, right? And so this is going to be the left side, and this is going to be their right side. So this is right upper quadrant, left upper quadrant. This is going to be right lower quadrant, and left lower quadrant. Now, many times I'll ask you what's in each of those, and that's good to know. In the right upper quadrant, we have things like the liver, okay, the gallbladder, and the large intestine, okay, some parts of the small intestine. In the middle over here, we have things like on the left upper quadrant, we have stomach, most of the stomach. Okay, we have the spleen, also parts of the large intestine and small intestine. Down here, lower left quadrant, we're going to have, of course, large intestines and small intestines. Really, is that about it? And then on this side, we're going to have large intestine, small intestine, and the appendix. Okay, so that's the old here. This is the way we mark things. So if someone, say, has a, let's see, say you're working in an emergency room and you're going to get like GSW, maybe a gunshot wound, okay? Let's say 30-year-old male GSW, left upper quadrant, whatever. Okay, that's how it's usually going to be listed, so you know where to look. If you're looking elsewhere, you're not going to find it, right? Now that brings us to this whole other section, which is, again, we're going to draw our little person here. Their arms out, belly. This is harder. Okay, those are their little arms, neck, whatever. Their head, their ears. Here. So this one, though, we're going to do 9. I'm going to do dark gray, I guess. So here's, again, the diaphragm. We're going to do lines like this and lines like this. And here's the umbilicus. Okay, so there's going to be 9 of these buggers. And these ones we're only using really for testing. We don't use them clinically very often, and I'll tell you why in just a second. Main reason is because, actually, the words don't make sense. Like, this is called the lumbar region, okay? And remember, we're still here. This is left, and this is right. So this is left lumbar. This is going to be right lumbar, okay? But lumbar means the low back. It's the lumbar side. So it can get difficult to understand what you're actually talking about, because if people don't remember this or they didn't learn this, for some reason, they're not going to think of it that way. This side is called the left hypo, which means below, chondriac. Now, chondriac means actually cartilage. Okay, the cartilage of the ribs is here, and typically we understand the word hypochondriac, there it is, as being someone who's faking it. In medical terms, we have a different word for this. It's actually called, let's do it in red here, malingerer. Okay, someone who's faking their injuries, for example. Up through here, this one's called the umbilical. That's an easy one. Okay, that's the umbilical region. And here's the hypo. Okay, this is below, right? Hypogastric. Another word we have to learn. This is the Epi, which means above, gastric. Now, gastric will usually mean stomach, but it is below the stomach. But gastric can also mean belly, and we don't like that term when we're talking pretty specific stuff with uh, what's it called, science and healthcare stuff like that. So anyway, this is the very first one I've used with this. This is the program is called OBS, and I'm using it on a tablet, which maybe you can see show itself. There's a tablet which is showing itself with a little cool little pen, and I've got, of course, my mouse on one side. Over here, jeez, everything's slippery now. My mouse and my pen and all of this kind of stuff, and I'm looking at a computer with another camera. I'm going to show you the whole setup right here. Check this out. So there's the laptop right here. There's the what I was just showing you. It has all the stuff, and there's the book I was using for the reference, and then there's my green screen behind me, which makes me show up as part of the program. Anyway, this is Dr. Sean over at, well, I mean, technically it's on my channel, The Natural BodyWorks. So what I want you to do is subscribe. Oh, wait, let's go S-U-B. Subscribe. Yeah, let's go to the next freaking thing, man. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe. Okay? Subscribe, like, okay? Hit that like button, which is down here. Subscribe, which is down here. Don't forget to hit the bell or whatever that thing is. I don't know how to do that. So you can get the rest of them. And if you're, you don't have to comment or anything. If you want to, hey, more than happy to. I'll get better at these, of course, as we go on. And you guys have a good one. Do your homework, and we'll see you on the flip side. Okay? Take care. We'll talk to you soon. Let me get this thing. I'm working on two computers. It's a real pain to figure out where the heck my mouse is because I can never find it. Anyway, we'll talk to you guys.